till now it has been more of a broadcast session. So before we get started, we will start with the usual Sukha Pranayama. So I'd like to request all of you to keep your back and neck straight. And you may gently close your eyes. And take some deep breaths. Slow and deep inhalation. Slow and deep exhalation. As we are taking deep breaths, feel our posture. Align the weight distribution. Relax the facial muscles, neck muscles. Let go all external thoughts. With a calm and quiet mind, continue to feel your breath. Watch your breath. Observe your breath. Let the breath be natural, normal. Continue to feel. Thoughts, they come and go. Just witness them without dwelling over them or feeding into them. Come back to the breath. And with that settling down, we will all chant Shanti Mantra. Please chant. Inhale. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. You may gently rub your palms. Relax your eyes. Open your eyes. Yeah. Good morning once again, those who have just joined. Great to have all of you on the Sunday early morning. So before we get started, just a quick and a brief introduction about Yogakshema. Some of you might have already heard about Yogakshema from us. For those who haven't, for the benefit of them, Yogakshema is a not-for-profit service organization, primarily working in the space of educating people in terms of enhancing their quality of life. Yogakshema works with diverse segments of people, right from homemakers to corporate executives, teachers, students, parents, medical doctors, nurses, self-help groups, caregivers, NGO volunteers, and so on, several of them. Yogakshema workshops are primarily based on the latest advances in the field of neuroscience. To name a few of our workshops, our most common ones are understanding our brain and mind, art and science of forgiveness. One of the recent popular ones has been reprogramming our neurochemistry to overcome depression, mind training, mind-body medicine, and so on. Both myself and Lalita are fortunate to have been associated with them for last almost 10 years now. And both of us are also faculty members and volunteers of Yogakshema. The organization is completely run by volunteers. For more details of that, you can of course look at the website. With this, let me also quickly introduce Dr. Usha Vastare. Some of you have attended our workshops earlier. Some of you might not have had the opportunity. Dr. Usha Vastare, she is a co-founder of Yogakshema and also currently a mentor for Yogakshema. She is primarily a neuroscientist by training, an author and a social worker. She has been a faculty of Temple University School of Medicine, Philadelphia in USA for more than 17 years. She has published over 70 research papers and abstracts in various reputed journals and contributed to 5 books used for continuing medical education. Since last 12 years, she has been primarily in India and has worked with various NGOs, schools, colleges, and conducted hundreds of workshops in this field. Her objective is primarily to introduce positive psychology and the neuroscientific concepts in a very practical and a scientific way to enable people to lead a more holistic and enjoyable living. Her programs have been telecast on various television channels, radio talk shows, both in India as well as overseas. She's an avid reader of both modern science and also our scriptures, both Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy. What attracted me towards Yogakshema is she brings in a nice, beautiful confluence of modern science and spirituality. That is what mostly, I would say, primarily has had me hooked on to Yogakshema for so long. I would say both me and Lalita have been immensely benefited by attending several of Yogakshema's workshops, both in our personal and professional lives. So with that, I'd also like to introduce Samit Shetty. He's a trustee of Yogakshema and also co-founder of Chaitanya India Microfinance. It's a Karnataka-based rural microfinance organization. Although it is now expanded beyond Karnataka, it's in several states in India. I'm glad that Samit has helped us to formulate this webinar and will also moderate this session. With this, I will now like to hand it over to Samit to conduct the webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Vasant, and welcome to everybody. Moderating Zoom session is a first-time experience, so we will all do this journey together. I will, of course, request all of you. I've kept most of your audios on mute, so if you have any question, if you want to ask anything, feel free to unmute, type on your chat, or raise your hand. So we can take it that way. Keep your videos live. It will also hopefully make that more interactive. The idea is spend 50% of the sessions addressing an agenda that we have, and another 50% on the questions that come from all of you. So we are hoping that it will be an interactive session. There will be lots of questions. The topic we've chosen, yoga and mindfulness, both are very popular buzzwords in today's world. I think all of us in various aspects of our lives practice or try and understand how to be more mindful and try and live our lives more mindfully. I think the larger question for this audience we will try and address over the next 1 hour is how do we get mindfulness to permeate through our daily lives, our daily routines? How do we use mindfulness to become more, to improve our well-being? So that's the large question that we will address, and we will start off initially with we have some themes. So we will take up each of those themes, and then we will open out for some questions, and hopefully we will have time for more questions towards the end. So I would like to start with a question that came from, I think, Vani Manjunath. So thanks for the question. It kind of sets the platform very well. So the question is very fundamental, so that it sets the background for us to start. So what really is mindfulness? What is, if I were to read the question, what are the prerequisites for mindfulness? So Auntie, just to kind of take that question forward, could you give us a background on mindfulness from the context of the audience here?
Certainly. Let me try and share my screen. One second. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Is that fine?
Yes, yes.
All right. How do I navigate the slides? Okay, there. Is it in full screen mode? I'm sorry for this this is my first time too sharing the screen with this webinar.
It's very clear, Auntie. You can, I think
fine.
we can share, you can continue.
All right. All of you have heard this from both Vasant and Lalita during your yoga sessions. Be mindful, focus on your breath, and try to be mindful as much as possible for each and every pose. I have had I have learned yoga from many different people. One thing I can say, I have heard both Lalita and Vasant use this term, be mindful a whole lot more times than I have heard from any other yoga teacher, that I can assure you. So the whole purpose of today's session is to figure out how we can be mindful at other times. When you are practicing yoga with Vasant or Lalita, you know how easy it is when they are giving you instructions about focus on your breath, focus on your breath, let both body and mind be together in that particular pose. And then we leave the class, we get out of that gate, and then a car overtakes us, or a truck or a bus, and then we know how it's so easy to lose our cool. Or in today's contact, we finish our yoga class in our room, and then we come out, turn on the TV, and then we see, oh, the lockdown has extended for one more week. And then we know what happens to our anxiety level. So this whole the attempt is to figure out how, using our yoga practices, wherein we see how much more flexible we are right now than when we started. Physically, we are flexible. Can we also be mentally flexible? Can we be cognitively flexible through these yoga practices? Because our scriptures say, and we know, yoga is not just for the physical body. It is also at the mental level and even beyond. So we are trying to bring the two together, how this yoga can help us at a physical level and also at a mental level. May not be the way it has been prescribed in the scriptures with all the 8 steps, yama, niyama, all of that. We have read that in our Patanjali Yoga Sutras. But from a scientific perspective, how can we make use of these yoga practices that we do, physical practices? How can we take that forward and use it at the mental level, so that the benefits of the yoga that we do for 1 hour, whether in our room, at home, or in the yoga studio at Goodart, at Vasant's place, how can we utilize these benefits throughout the day? Because we know mind is subtler than the body, and subtler means it occupies a whole lot more space, and it is available all the time too, our mind, unlike our bodies. Only when we are doing the asanas, we're going to be using the body. But at the level of the mind, how can we use the benefits of these yoga throughout the day? That is the attempt for today's session. And so mindfulness, what is mindfulness? Is it a virtue? Was the question. Absolutely, it's a virtue if we understand what mindfulness is properly and implement it in a proper way. We will see how it may not be as a virtue as we go along, we will see. And is it, what is the next thing that they ask? Is it a tool? Is it? Are
there any prerequisites for
prerequisites? Yeah. The important prerequisite is to be open-minded about this, and to be excited about to learn something new about mindfulness. We already know what mindfulness is all about. how can we understand mindfulness from various different angles so that we will be able to implement this as a tool throughout the day. As long as we have this open-mindedness, and yes, I'm sure we all have, that is the only thing we need. And we can see how mindfulness can be used as a tool to benefit a whole lot more. And what type of benefits we will see later. The classic definition of mindfulness is this. We have heard about it, we know about this, which is bringing one's complete attention to the present experience on a moment-to-moment basis in a non-judgmental way. Even though it's a short definition, anytime I get a definition like this, I go back to my high school days, how we have to learn it by rote memory. So instead of that, I'm going to try and make use of this definition in a much simpler way to understand and see how this definition helps us. There are only three things that we need to remember about that definition. One, being in the present moment. And to be completely focused and concentrated upon whatever we are doing. That is paying attention in a particular way. What is that particular way? That particular way is being non-judgmental. I'll take an example, everyday example, when you are doing yoga. When you hear Lalita's voice saying, be mindful, then we know. We bring our mind to whatever we are doing at that time, whichever pose that we are in. That is paying attention and also being present. That means both body and mind together in the same place. Many times, especially if we like the pose and if we are good with a particular asana, we do it in a mechanical way. The body will be there in the yoga studio, but the mind goes elsewhere. So when we hear that voice from Lalita and Vasant, be mindful, right away our mind comes back to the level of the body. Or they say, focus on your breath. Right away our mind comes back to the body in that studio. Because breath is the bridge between body and mind. As soon as we focus on our breath, both body and mind are together in the same place. That is what it means by being in the present moment and paying attention. They said paying attention in a particular way. What is that? Being non-judgmental. Yes, we bring our focus and right away we feel, oh, it is hurting. Our mind goes to that pain in that particular pose. If it is just observing the pain and witnessing the pain, yes, we should be doing. No, that is the way it is supposed to be. However, as soon as we feel that physical pain, right away the mind goes to the next step. Oh, this is what happened yesterday too, and it hurt the whole day because somewhere I did not do it right. Or what happened last week, or I should be really careful. The thoughts from one little pain jumps to many different steps. This is what we want to prevent. If it is painful, just watch it, witness it, and just withdraw the pose just a little bit so that it is comfortable. This is what we mean by non-judgmental. And especially if it is a group session, we will be doing the pose without our knowledge. Not that we want to watch others, because we hear these instructions too from Vasant and Lalita. If it is a group session, pay attention to yourself. Still, this is the nature of the mind. Mind goes elsewhere, looking at somebody else's pose. And without our knowledge, trying to compare. This is what we mean by non-judgmental, means not to be doing that. If we just become aware of this definition and be aware of these three aspects of being mindful, as soon as we hear our yoga teachers talk about be mindful or focus on your breath, then our whole attention should be on our own pose, both body and mind together in that particular pose, and not judging that pose in any way. So that is the basic thing about the definition. Yes, Samit.
Yeah, there is a very related question from Prashant. Just to contrast a little bit, if you can just
yeah,
on that point, contrast between concentration and mindfulness, because
yes, very good.
There is a paying attention part. I mean,
right.
Dwell a little bit more on that.
Wonderful.
And is concentration really an inherent requirement for mindfulness?
Absolutely. Just like as the definition itself says, paying attention is to be focused, to be concentrating. I was going to touch upon this, and I'm glad this question came about right now. This is what, whenever I speak to the teachers, to the students, what do we do as teachers or parents? Ask our kids, focus, concentrate. We all know how to concentrate. But along with the concentration, or when we are focusing on any task for that matter, not just while studying, without our knowledge, we are also judging that. For example, a student studying a subject, but saying, I don't like this subject. I don't know. This is my last year. I don't have to do this when I go to 11th grade. That is what is being judging. Then we are only focusing, but we are not mindful. Truly mindful is even much more than focusing, much more than concentration. And I just took an example of the student studying, and not necessarily that. It could be a homemaker cutting vegetables, or it could be at a corporate level, sitting at a desk or at the meeting, paying attention to the meeting, but thinking about when is this going to be over. That is the difference between focusing and being mindful. Being mindful is going beyond concentration, not judging, neither positive nor negative. And then we will get to that. What does that mean as we go along further? So in this definition, we talked about how both body and mind together should be in one place. But I want to add one more thing to this, which is we understand the connection between body and mind, but many times we are not very familiar with this, that our actions, our habits, our behavior is also connected with the way we feel about the body and mind. So there is a very close connection between this mind, body, and behavior. This is the basis for a therapy or a training, a type of mind training called cognitive behavior training, that is done at a cognitive level. But it doesn't have to be a therapy. It doesn't have to be a separate mind training. If we understand this concept and try and use, especially when we are doing yoga, and later on to use this as a benefit throughout the day, this fundamental intellectual understanding is very much needed, because with yoga, we experience the benefits at the physical level. But once we understand, how do we take it to the next level at the mental level? That how do we understand this, that there is a connection between mind, body, and our habits, our actions, our behavior. then the practice of yoga becomes even more empowering. I will take this thread as we go along when I use many other examples, but at this stage, just that is enough to know that there is a very close connection between mind, body, and our behavior. And this is when mindfulness becomes truly a virtue, when we put this into action at the level of behavior, our habits, when we have to change our habits. We will get to that in a minute. When I take other examples, it will make sense. This is first level of understanding mindfulness. I have two other definitions of mindfulness which will help us in our everyday implementation purposes, and let's go into that, which is this, the second definition, which is, we know we all enjoy our yoga session after the 1 hour, whether we do it in our room at home, like what's happening right now, or we come to Lalita's place in the yoga studio. But we have to go back to the same old job, same old family, same old friends. We learn so much here, and we feel the change at the level of the body. We feel a change at the mental level while we are doing yoga, while we are in the studio, because of the guided instructions by Vasant and Lalita. But what happens when we go back to our home, when we go back to our office, when we go back to our friends? This is the issue. Then how do we change our perspective itself? This is the next definition of mindfulness, which is, it's a way of seeing things, seeing people, seeing circumstances and situations as though you are seeing it for the first time. I can assure you from my experience for several years, and I have discussed this with Vasant too many a times, for me this is the hardest. Although if we can keep trying to practice this, many things become also very simple. So I'm trying to understand this definition as I'm implementing in my day-to-day life, how to make this, how can we understand at this deeper level? I'll just give you an example. For example, when we are meeting a stranger, or we go for a meeting at the corporate level, we have no idea. We have not checked out the person like we do in these days. It's so easy to go onto the internet and then get the scoop about everybody. Think that it is about 30 years back that you didn't have access to any of that. Or without your knowledge, you're meeting somebody, a stranger. When you're meeting somebody for the very first time, that person is neither your friend nor is he an enemy, because you don't make any judgments. You're just happy to meet this person. And usually when we are meeting, when we are in a happy mood, we would like to meet somebody new. That has to be the frame of mind when we meet the same old people, the same old family members, the same old husband, the same old wife, the same old kids, and same old parents, and same old boss. I can assure you, maybe I will make it this little bit lighter. It is becoming very serious. You can try this with your spouses. It will be a lot more fun. It will be a lot easier, and you will benefit this a lot more than with trying others. Go back to your times when you met your spouse for the first time, even before your marriage or soon after your marriage. How happy you felt, and So you wanted to know so many new things about that person because there was so much to learn about the person, including the physical features too, right? Not only the personality. Can we bring that frame of mind? Try with your spouses. And then try and extend it to others. And it is a beautiful experience, I can tell you. And if you cannot do it with others, try at least do it with your spouses and with your kids. And when you succeed, the next level with your parents. Sometimes I know it is harder with parents, but go back when you were young and your parents were also a lot younger. And this is what will truly help us. If we can succeed in this, I cannot tell you how beautiful our lives can be. And this, as I said, from today, as soon as the session is over, try it on your spouse and you will see the benefit. So I will take that up later. The third definition of mindfulness. You know, we have certain things. We like to do certain things, but we have to do certain other things at the same time. Not that we don't, we are trying to ignore some of the things that we do. We know we are all responsible. We know we should be doing the things that are put on our table, which we do. However, many a times at that particular time, sometimes we have to choose between what we want to do and what we have to do. And this is where mindfulness comes about. Whatever that has to be done at that particular time, choose that. Because many a times, whatever we have to do takes a little bit less precedence or less liking than what we want to do. This is the tug of war that happens in our minds. Yes, we want to go out for walks, but at the same time, we want to prepare breakfast. Until now, it was okay. We could have gone for walks later in the day, but during summer, I wish I could have walked much earlier, but it won't happen. This is just one of the common things that happens, used to happen to me when I was a lot younger. So that is what that example comes to my mind. So when there is a tug of war in our mind between the things that we have to do and that we want to do at that particular time, can we try and take away that division between have to do and want to do? And say, whatever that has to be done at that moment, let me focus on that. And then just saying that to ourselves in the mind, it helps us. So whatever we want to do, we will be able to do much later without too much of effort. Because the reason is, if there is a tug of war in our mind that we have to do and we want to do, and then we choose, of course, we have to take care of this. And many a times, whatever we want to do gets neglected. And whatever we want to do might get ignored at times. So, but when we look at the situation in a mindful way, then we will be able to accommodate everything. But this happens by training, not just overnight. That is why this intellectual understanding of mindfulness from various different angles is extremely important. And first, the intellectual understanding, and just understanding is not going to be enough. There has to be intellectual conviction for this. Then mindfulness becomes a virtue. this is also a way of facing the reality. Many a times we want the reality as we want it to be. We don't want to accept the reality as it is. So this definition of mindfulness will remind us to accept the reality as it is. And what does that mean? In the present scenario, what does this mean, this definition? Accepting and facing the reality. It is a way of facing the reality as it is. For example, let us suppose you get the news, the lockdown is extended for another week. Earlier, our reaction could be, what? I can't believe. I was all set, saying that this is going to be over, and I was ready for our mates to come back because they're still not allowing in our apartment complex. And this happened again. I can't believe. What? That would have been the way we would have reacted. But hopefully, after this session, hopefully there won't be such news. If there is such a news, it would be, so what? Another week. Maybe this will give me a little bit more time to be practicing this mindfulness for another week in a focused way. So what? Let me just accept this without resisting. Because certain things, when we do not have a choice, if we keep resisting it at the level of the mind, not at the level of action, we know we need to work towards that. Not at the level of action, but at the level of mind, if we keep resisting, this is again what causes stress. So instead of that, instead of what, I can't believe, so what? I hope we'll be able to see that after today's session.
So, Auntie, one question that, as you mentioned, the specific question, right?
Sure.
So, what is the first reaction, right? I mean, it is possible that when you hear or when you come across a circumstance, your first reaction is that exclamation, what? So, the objective of mindfulness is to not have that kind of reaction, or how? I mean, the what to so what, right? That path. Where exactly would we put mindfulness in that? Because it's a natural what that will come.
Yeah. When I say so what, not in a careless manner. Usually we use, oh, so what? I don't care. Usually, so what precedes, I don't care, whatever it is. We go into this dejection mode. I'm not saying from that level. I use this what, so what, because it is so catchy. It will help us to remind, oh, so what, rather than resisting the reality. The reality is, it is extended for several more days. And if we resist this, again, judging, and when we do not have control over that, this is what sets, this is another definition for our stress, that when we resist reality, when we do not accept the reality as it is what truly causes stress. One of the definitions of stress. And looking at the situation in a mindful way is what takes the stress out of this. This is what, especially you might have heard, a lot of you might have heard, that there is a program in West especially called Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction Program that was first started by Jon Kabat-Zinn. How do we use this mindfulness to overcome stress in any situation? And for that, just to take out the stress from our lives, this what so what is so catchy that will, this is like just a tool to make us bring our focus back onto the reality and to look at it in a mindful way. Accepting that. That reminds me of a serenity prayer. It is a prayer, but it is highly scientific. You might have all heard about it. Whatever we cannot change in our lives, can we accept that with serenity? And whatever that is possible to change, let us have the courage to change that. But this, we don't have control over changing the situation. Then it is better to accept with serenity. That is what will help us to deal with it. The reason is, let me take this definition and then this will help us. That you cannot make the same mistake twice. The second time you make it, it's no longer a mistake. It is a choice. It is a habit. This will go with that what so what understanding of mindfulness. This way of looking at very deep and very this phrase or this concept is very deep. It takes a while for us to really completely imbibe this in our daily lives. If we can, this is really going to help us. And especially with our interpersonal relationships, our kids or with our elders, they push our emotional buttons and we react in the same way as we have been doing. The first time is okay. We know it, we are reacting. Even after knowing, it is hard to come out of it. We may not react physically, we may not react verbally, but we react mentally. As far as I'm concerned, as a neuroscientist, it's not just at the action level, it's not just at the verbal level. Even if it happens at the thought level, the brain will do its job. Because if it is a negative thing, usually reactions will result in some negative emotions and feelings. Such negative emotions and feelings will release certain negative chemicals and the brain will do its job. The other person may not know that we have reacted, because many times we are able to control our actions, we are able to control our words. But what happens at the mind level?
Can I ask a question here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Deepa, yes, it is. I mean, seeing people for the first time, yes, I guess that's what mindfulness is about. But then this and reacting to a circumstance, how we choose, because when we say we have to do it, it is our choice too. We are making certain choices there. So to come to terms with it, I think that's what it means, because you're fully aware when you made that decision to do it. When you say, I have to do this now. So the problem I feel is probably not just these two, but two other aspects that are linked to it. When we are reacting to a person, there is also the memory thing that is always playing in our mind.
True.
As in, let us say we are dealing with I think where it is very easy to understand is a character with a short fuse or a highly irritable character that we're dealing with. We always go back onto a memory. Okay, this is what this person might say, so I have to do this. Or this is how I have to react. Or this is how I have to do it. The same thing with circumstances. I mean, it's an emotional response, I think, half the time. I don't like to do this means I'm a bit disappointed that I've been forced to do this. I've put myself in such a situation that I have to do this. So I feel it is intrinsically very linked. Mindfulness in some ways is very linked to how we utilize our memories as well as our emotions, and how to come out of that trap. I mean, it's so intrinsic to human mind, right? I mean, these are the basic components of human mind, memory and emotion. And how do we come out of that is really the question that I was posing.
Such a deep question, Deepa, that itself shows that you're practicing, you have thought about it. And just like all of us, I can assure you, we all go through the same things, but you have verbalized in a really a lucid way, lucid manner. This is the hard thing. And it cannot happen. I'm not even using overnight. It cannot happen in a short while, like in weeks or months. If that person is a very important person in our lives, in the sense that we are dealing with that person day in and day out, and if it's a difficult person in our life, and we have to be able to figure out a way to be with that person. So there is no other way but to keep practicing and practicing and practicing. Even with that memory that comes about, there might be certain times that that person might have behaved a little differently. And to remember that, and not just remember that, and try to put it across in a positive way. I'll just give you an example with elderly people, with our own parents or in-laws. This is very typical of that. This happens by experience, I'm saying. When that happens, to remember certain times, either when we were young or when they were not like this, and try to understand them in a way. All of this is happening because of the underlying thing, fear. Couple of other emotions, it could be anxiety, it could be anger, all of that. But if you want to boil down to one emotion, I always say fear is the mother of all negative emotions. Everything boils down to fear. So if we can understand that person, he or she is doing or saying or acting out of fear, then our whole way of looking at the situation will be different. It is just like in our mind, if we have, or when we have raised kids, a 4-year-old kid, when it is afraid, how we coax that kid, how we cajole the kid to overcome fear. Many a times we have to do this with adults. This we can do not in a condescending way, looking at them like in a childish manner, not like kids, but trying to understand. And once we understand completely, this is where it is coming from, our way of responding will be very different than what we are used to, with the memory of tough memories of that same situation. And this is nothing but practice, practice, practice. And as I said, this is the hardest, but I can assure you, even if you try and succeed this with one person, try with one person at a time. Once we get that, when we feel that success, then we will be able to do it with others. But when that happens, it's a beautiful experience, I can tell you.
Auntie,
Yes.
you covered a bit on the action versus the choice rather than reacting. But the other aspect that you covered is to harmonize have to and want to. And I think Prashant had a question. If he can ask the question, I request him to go ahead. Otherwise, I will ask it for him.
Hi, feeling very pleasure to be part of this whole session here. So, is accepting the reality and acting accordingly with one's own convictions the ultimatum, and that brings in mindfulness?
So,
How do we act is the mindfulness way. We can act in many different ways. But if we choose to be non-judgmental, but still hold on to our conviction, which means accepting with respect to interpersonal relationships, accepting the person as they are, not tolerating them, but accepting them. There is a difference between toleration and acceptance. That is being mindful. Respecting the differences and nothing against the person, but against probably the views that the person holds. Or for example, I'll take an example with the kids. Example of a kid. When we're raising children, we don't have anything against a kid when the kid watches too much of, let's say, TV. How will the kid understand that we don't have anything against that person, only on the action? We need to be able to separate out the action from that person, whether raising the child or with parents or with idlers or with our colleagues. When this is again, we know, but consciously, mindfully, every time, each time, if we keep separating the action from the person, the very next moment, the way we are with that person is very different. When we do not separate the action from the person, whatever that has hurt us will carry on for a longer time. However, when we separate out the action from the person, then it is much quicker. We go back to our other ways, old ways. I don't like the way you acted, but I don't have anything against you. That will show even in our action. That will show in our words, because the conviction is already there at the thought level.
And similarly between the have to and want to, right? I mean, it's the same.
Yes.
We've kind of gone through 1 hour. If you're okay, I'll switch gears and try and get Vasant to at least
Absolutely.
Come in here. Vasant, so for you, a question as a practitioner of yoga and having attended your classes, it's a beautiful experience. I want to understand what is the role. How have you integrated mindfulness practice both into your life and into your yoga sessions? If you could kind of give us some ideas on that.
Sure. I look at, in a way, yogasana as mindful physical stretching, and the practice of pranayama or the breath control as mindful stretching of our breath, both in space and time. When I say space, in terms of right nostril, left nostril, both nostrils, through the mouth, and in terms of time, in terms of fast breathing, slow breathing, and so on. So the mindful physical stretching, what I see is the days I am not really overtly caught up in my head, those are the days I'm able to stretch more comfortably. But at the same time, the days when I'm excessively caught up in my head with whatever has happened the previous day or things like that, I can see that effect on the body as well, where I'm not able to be as flexible what I was compared to a good day. So for me, I look at my own yoga practice more as a way of enhancing my mind-body awareness. And I can actually, to some extent, see that whenever I'm caught into some sort of, let's say, some emotional tiffs with somebody or something that I'm holding up at an emotional level, I can see that effect on the body because of practicing yoga through that aspect of enhancing our mind-body awareness. I can see that I'm holding up at my knees or maybe at my neck. And moment I'm able to recognize that, I do something to sort of maybe just turn around or loosen about, and then relate that to what am I really holding up at this point of time. So I look at it as a way of enhancing my own biofeedback mechanism. And that is the way I sort of integrate mindfulness and yoga in a way to enhance my mind-body awareness.
And you've been always doing this, Vasant, or this is kind of relating back in terms of has the practice of mindfulness changed anything for you in terms of you've always been sensitive to how your body reacts when there are things on your mind?
No, not at all. Earlier it was more at a physical level, enjoying those poses, enjoying that workout, getting in that adrenaline rush, being able to do it. Sometimes even one-upmanship against somebody else, saying that, okay, I'm able to do it. But over a period of time, as I've been better able to understand and trying to understand mindfulness and trying to see its relationship with my day-to-day living, this biofeedback mechanism has, I would say, has enhanced. That has been, I would say, my primary learning. Something that constantly buzzes in me is a statement by Mahatma Gandhi. I look at him as a great karma yogi, and he says whatever happens in the external world and the way we perceive it, there are mirror reflections of that even in our body. So our body is a great temple to see how we are responding or reacting, or how our worldview is with regards to external situation. And I keep reminding myself of that, particularly in difficult situations, and try to relate that with my own health, with my wellness, and also the people around me.
Thanks, Vasant. Lalita, you want to add anything?
Yeah, in fact, I mean, practicing this mindfulness, as Auntie also, explained about it, throughout the day, it is a challenge. Whatever said and done, because doing the chores, what we are doing it on a regular basis, the mind just, goes off. So there is there's a need for us to be aware throughout the day, yes. And of course, as Vasant explained that, with that stretching of breath and body, physical body, definitely helps us to get back to that.
Santi, I'll take Lalita's lead, and if you can kind of spend a little bit more time. I think she talked about how do we be mindful as we go through our chores, an example. But I mean, how does one? What's your suggestion on how to handle that?
Yeah. I'll try to combine both Vasant's and Lalita's. It's so nice to hear yoga practitioners like Vasant and Lalita sharing what they truly face while either doing yoga or throughout the day, and what they hold on to, their values. The first thing that I see in both their response is that self-awareness. Self-awareness is so heightened in both of them. The self-awareness is one of the most important qualities of conscious mind. And only
if I may pause you, I'm sorry to pause you. Also, if you could tell how to expand self-awareness, because that's a question that has also come up.
Okay.
Vani Manjunath, if you can, as you're talking about it, if you can just spend some time on how can one expand that?
Sure. First of all, we need to know that self-awareness is the most important quality that truly makes us human, because this is a quality of our conscious mind. Just like what Lalita said, throughout the day it is so tough, especially when we are doing chores. The word chores, that itself shows that we have to do it every day, which means it is also automatic. Because we don't want to be thinking too much on the same things that we do, like brushing our teeth, or cutting vegetables, or right now in the last 2 months, cleaning the house. Even now, cleaning the house has become automatic. The first 2 days, we had to pay a lot of attention to cleaning, mopping, sweeping. Now that has become automatic. So whenever anything becomes automatic, because of the innate biases that we have, all humans have a bias towards negativity. Our mind keeps focusing on something that is not right, something that has not happened. This is the nature of the mind. That's why it's called a bias, and it is innate. That is why it is innate, and it's present in all human beings. Once we understand this at an intellectual level, it's not that some people have this more and some people have this less. At different times, we have this more of biases towards certain people and less towards others. We are a lot more patient towards certain people. Once we recognize that, when we recognize that, means our awareness is heightened. Our self-awareness is heightened, both at the body level and at the mind level. When I say self-awareness, not just at the body level, Vasant has figured out a way to use that self-awareness at the physical level, which is really much, I wouldn't say easier, much more feasible, because we can act at it right away. But what we are trying to do today is to bring that awareness at the level of the mind, at the thought level, at the feelings level, not just at our own thought level and feeling level, but at the interpersonal relationship level. So much so, there is a new field that is coming up in neuroscience called interpersonal biology. So even extremely important, what is happening to our awareness at the level of our interpersonal relationship. If we are already recognizing it, that means we are aware. Now, 50% of the issue is covered if we are aware of it. Just like they say, 50% of the problem is solved if we know that there is a problem, if we have identified a problem or a challenge in anything for that matter. The other 50% is to be practicing mindfulness. If we are recognizing that we are aware, but the thing is, after recognizing, we feel bad. This is where my, I would say, request to you all, based on this gray hair wisdom, I'm trying to tell you, because I've been there, done that. Now the thing is that self-awareness is the quality that is making us more human. So let us not feel bad about it happened again, rather than, oh, my self-awareness is high. So let us feel good about it and just be mindful. Take it as a matter of fact. Otherwise, what happens, because of our innate bias, we won't have time to go into this, maybe another session. This innate bias is very important for our very survival, because it has evolutionary biological significance. That is why all of us have these biases. But let us not focus on the bias. Let us focus on our awareness, self-awareness. That is another quality that is helping us to evolve as better human beings. If we start focusing on that self-awareness and combine this mindfulness practice, which is a practice, not a one-time event, it's on a moment-to-moment basis, which means we will keep getting better and better and better at it as we are practicing. So taking that same example, especially Lalita's example of when we are doing the chores throughout the day, when we are doing it in an automatic way, can we bring in mindfulness? Can we keep focusing on cutting the vegetables itself rather than our mind going elsewhere? The physical action we are doing, when I say it is automatic, that's why it's a chore. We're automatically cutting vegetables, but our mind is on what I should be doing the next hour after this is done, after the cooking is done. Rather than that, keep practicing, looking at the vegetables, feeling, be completely in the moment, doing whatever we are doing at that moment. That is mindfulness. That is heightened self-awareness combined with awareness.
Auntie, one of the issues you mentioned a little bit when you covered an introduction is the importance of mindfulness in interpersonal relationships. And you did allude to being non-judgmental. One of the questions that Umesh he can add, I think, as we go along, is the question that he's asked is: you are already aware of a person's habits and qualities, and hence, some of the bias is coming from that. So how do you kind of handle that? Am I right, Umesh? Is that the how do you separate, the fact that, you have to look at the person without being non-judgment, but how do you separate the fact that, some of the actions of the person is coming from his qualities, his habits? How do you kind of separate the two when you?
If it is possible, this is what I have done, and it has worked both with kids and with adults. Just tell them that I don't have anything against you, only this, whatever the actions, the behavior or the habits. To try and have a genuine communication with that person, that you're trying to separate your action from that person. Sometimes just having a genuine, open-minded talk, it will truly help. It has helped me. Of course, depending on the person, it is taken in a wrong way, maybe the first time. But our non-judgmental actions towards that person, they will at least start observing. It's only towards this particular action he is saying, doing this, or he is getting angry at me, not other times. They will also start observing their own thing. So many times for me, it also depends on our nature. I'm in that way, I'm very communicative. I would like to openly talk about this with the other person. But before we do that, we have to be really practice this non-judgmental attitude. Otherwise, we will also get caught up in the communication issue if we start reacting right away. Once we practice this non-judgmental attitude, it will be much easier through communication. Even with adults, it is possible. And even with adults, whether with families, with friends, and even with colleagues, it is possible. This is my personal experience.
Yeah.
As a yoga practitioner, Vasant and Lalita, whenever they make us do, especially in certain final positions, there is this thing of Stiram Sukham Asanam, and also that, especially when you're also observing your breath in pranayama sessions, I remember Vasant calling out saying, don't judge it, just observe it. And that's when you realize the quality of the whole exercise itself changes in some ways. Because when we say, oh, I have to correct it, we never get to correct it. But it's only when you just observe it without judging it, that's when you're realizing, oh, I don't have to correct it, it'll correct itself. But now to convert that as a practice of the mind, I think that's the key. I mean, in other aspects of the mind, where we don't judge ourselves on every tiny little thought, but just keep observing it very passively. And I suppose then the thought process itself might just change. I can see that now, but to put it in practice.
So kind of take that forward,
Yeah.
take a little forward is, see, you've given us a perspective of mindfulness, the 2 or 3 broad aspects. What tools, what would you suggest? I mean, Vasant, you should also join in, since you've also been practicing this for a while. How do you practice mindfulness, or practice getting better at having a non-judgmental perspective, practice better at being in the present moment? The 3 parts that you mentioned, right? If you could just give us some tools, and we can then slowly wrap it up.
From my point of view, I would look at it based on what I've been observing, is the tool of watching our breath. While we are emotionally caught up in some scenarios, how the breath really changes, how it becomes shallow, and how sometimes it even becomes so rapid. So becoming aware of the breath is a great tool. And maybe in some situations, yes, we need to take some 3 deep breaths intentionally, so that we don't continue to have our thoughts snowballing in the same direction, and take a back seat and give it a little pause between the external stimulus and whatever our response to that stimulus is. The other thing that I've been trying to practice is mindful eating. I would say about since last 2 years or so, I've been consciously trying to practice slow eating, mindful eating. To begin with, one of the things that I did was I started eating with my left hand, so that it naturally slows me down, so that I can enjoy the food better, and at the same time be more aware, rather than making eating food as a chore. But over a period of time now, I don't need to do that, and I don't need to upset my mother of having eating with left hand. Now it has become a practice. And of course, thanks to several other people at home who have also helped me in that process to slow down my eating process. It has also helped me in terms of minimizing binge eating or emotional eating. All that has helped me to better manage all of those.
I'm hoping the mindful cooking and mindful eating is going together.
I would like to add one more point over here, if I may.
Yeah.
You can also keep on chanting some name like Shri Krishna Sharanam Mama all the time, and be self-aware slowly. Whenever you are getting stressed or going in a negative way, even while brushing your teeth, try to keep on. Initially, it will be difficult, but Om Namah Shivaya, Shri Krishna Sharanam, whatever you're comfortable with, or Gayatri Mantra, whatever. In your free time, whenever you observe your thoughts, try to keep on chanting this. So this will also again help you to be focused and be in the moment and not go away with all the negative, all the biases, all the future or past things. That also I feel. And of course, pranayam and yoga is the ultimate.
So, Auntie, you want to add something to that, and probably comment a little bit. We've on specifically on chanting and the importance of whether something that I don't do. So I'm very curious to know how important that is in terms of
See, while brushing,
becoming
like
more
she
mindful.
said, doing chores, it is difficult to be in the moment. Cutting vegetables, brushing your teeth, immediately your mind goes away and runs away. So what I try to do is try to chant Om Namah Shivaya Om Namah in the mind itself. So that helps me to cut out all the other thoughts. Of course, again and again the thought will go in a different direction. Again, I will try to bring it back by chanting the name and blocking all the other negative thoughts. So whatever you are comfortable with, Om Namah Shivaya, Shri Krishna Sharanam Mama, Shri Ram, Gayatri Mantra, whatever you are comfortable with, in your free time, when you are not doing other things, definitely your thoughts are doing a lot more. So try to keep on chanting the names. That has helped me a lot.
Yeah, thanks. You want to take that?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll bring a neuroscience perspective to this. From a neuroscience perspective, Vasant's habit of focusing on the breath, not the other person's habit of repeating a japa or a mantra, is one and the same. We call that scientifically a repetition of a cognitive cue, or it's an affirmation. That affirmation could be in, anything, like, for example, oh, this too will pass, like what is happening with the lockdown, saying, repeating this too shall pass, this too will pass. And there is a single word, Pali word, not a Sanskrit word, which is anicca. Saying that, it will help. It will do the same effect like the other person said about Om Namah Shivaya. This is nothing but an affirmation repeated again and again. It actually rewires our brain. And again, we don't have time to get into that, what it is. It is what is called neuroplasticity. Any kind of habit that we want to change, the structure of the brain has to change. We are only focusing on the action, or even at the thought level. A habit is also at the thought level, not just at the action level. But what is happening at the level of the brain, the structure of the brain is changing. And the process of change in the structure of brain is called neuroplasticity. And that is repetition of a cognitive cue or an affirmation being repeated again and again and again. What I will add to that is Deepa's answer earlier too. Rather than focusing, bringing the back the focus, bringing the focus back in a passive way, we can infuse feelings into it. Loving feelings, being kind to ourselves, being loving to ourselves. Then it becomes even more intense, and the rewiring happens in a better way, because we're using different parts of the brain. Different real estate of the brain is used. Once when we're using certain feelings, it's different part of the brain. When we are repeating a mantra mentally, one part of the brain. If we are repeating the mantra verbally, a different part of the brain. Just focusing on the breath, different part of the brain. So many different connections from very different parts of the brain will get rewired, and the structure of the brain itself changes. That is the beauty of it. All I'm trying to bring you is a scientific perspective, or the mechanism, how all your practices, how it works from a scientific perspective, which means if it has worked on some people, it has to work on others. That is the power of science. And if I can add a couple more things to conclude.
You have to share your screen again, Auntie. I think
yeah, it didn't happen, I guess, right? Yeah, I have to share. Share the screen. There. That better?
Yeah.
I just want to wrap up answering your question in the next few slides. We've seen these, we have heard this. I bend so I don't break. This is a typical example we get when there is a hurricane, how a tall, rigid coconut tree can break, but not ornamental grass that that grows up to 5 feet, 6 feet, that won't break. Why? Because it is able to bend. In the same way, it's so easy for us to go into extremes. And with this, I'm going to add, go into extremes like looking at things from black and white. It's very easy. Take one side or the other. Either this is right or that is wrong. Here we say, but strike a balance. But there at the mental level, not looking at things as black and white, but all different shades of gray in between, especially with respect to interpersonal relationships. This works beautifully. Without our knowledge, because this has become automatic. This is what we have been brought up. Did not know what mindfulness was 30 years back when we were making, as adults, we were trying to understand life and then form our own life. We did not know any of this. But now that we know, can we start looking at things rather than from a Newtonian perspective as black and white, right or wrong, good and evil, his way, my way, our way, their way, instead of looking at that, but our way, looking at things from a perspective of not good or evil. Everything is good, but different shades of good. If that person, even if it is a habit, if they were really convinced it was not good for them, they would not be doing that. They're so convinced because, again, out of fear, out of anxiety, and whatever that habit is that has worked for them. And especially with elders, they know using the fear factor, they can get a lot of things done, especially as we get older. If we don't address the fear factor, the fear issue of fear and anxiety, without our knowledge, we will also start following certain of the things that we are not liking, that in our own parents, in our own in-laws, in our own spouses for that matter. So this is where I would like to introduce the term of cognitive flexibility. Rather than looking at it as just black or white, can we be flexible enough and be accommodative enough to see all different views as such? And I think this slide is very appropriate in this time. Then how yoga and mindfulness can help us build up our immunity. We know there are tons of studies wherein they have shown how yoga, not just yoga, any physical activity on a regular basis builds up our immunity at the physical level, at the physiological level. And especially a lot of us have experienced the days that we do yoga, especially once it has become a habit, our sleep pattern, how it has improved, our quality of sleep, how it has improved. We know this for sure. I don't need to go into detail about the connection between immunity and yoga. And especially in these days and going further, we will be even more convinced about practicing yoga on a regular basis. And pranayama, as somebody said, yoga and pranayama, they go together. The more and more yoga we do, we will understand the importance of pranayama, especially the breathing techniques. Now, how does mindfulness help with our immunity? One thing is, again, there are a lot of studies that has been done. Mindfulness, if you practice mindfulness, apart from what we have talked about, just giving 5 minutes or 10 minutes every day, sitting at the same place and at the same time every day practicing mindfulness breathing, we know how it helps reduce stress. And stress, when it is reduced, it has a tremendous beneficial effect on our immunity. That's a given. That is old news, as a matter of fact. But I want us to take a look at how can mindfulness help in our emotional immunity. And what do I mean by that? We know when we practice mindfulness, it reduces our anxiety to a tremendous level. Especially in this day and age, we will understand this importance of anxiety. I will call, again, just like what, so what, a catchy phrase. I want us to look at anxiety as a virus. We don't see it, but we feel its effect. It has the effect of a virus. And when we practice mindfulness, we build immunity towards this anxiety. Our anxiety level comes down. And there are certain mindfulness techniques specifically that can be done to reduce anxiety. You'll be able to discuss that with Vasant and Lalita later after the session. But this is how we build up our emotional immunity. And also, another aspect of emotional immunity is also how we can be resilient, how we can spring back. Yes, it is a given. All of us are afraid, are anxious about the future because it is uncertain. There is so much uncertainty. Anxiety is because of uncertainty. It is a given. Stress is because of uncertainties. If we know what we are up to, it is much easier to handle. But life throws us a curveball once in a while. And this is once in a while. We don't know. And we don't know what happens in the future. And so our stress level goes up, our anxiety level goes up, our fear goes up. And if we can again understand at an intellectual level, that intellectual understanding, comprehension, and conviction is very important, because we're all doing what we are supposed to be doing. We are practicing yoga, you're practicing mindfulness, we are practicing being with the family in a hopeful, in a joyous manner as much as possible. Still this anxiety lingers on, still this uncertainty lingers on, but this kind of intellectual comprehension and conviction is what is going to help. The same practices what we are doing will have even more of empowering benefits once we understand how all of this works. Again, all of us, I know when I started yoga, how this pose used to be one of my favorites. This is one of the easiest poses for most of us, but it will have so much of a benefit because we know, especially when we are looking at the mirror, when we are doing the pose, we can strike this pose in a beautiful manner. But now, as it says, how can we be warriors doing the warrior pose and not a warrior? This is where the what Socrates has said comes to my mind. And I used to call myself, when I first read the book, the Peace Pilgrim, I forget her name, a lady who's called a Peace Pilgrim. She walked from north to south in US, and she walked across the states, across the country to bring peace into the country. And that little book, Peace Pilgrim, I always used to, I read it a few decades back, that is etched in my mind. I used to call myself a peace activist. We all have this activist bent of mind. At times, it hurts us rather than being just an activist. If we can call ourselves peaceful activist or peaceful warrior, as Socrates has said, because all the battles, especially now and in the future, whether we know it or not, what we are facing is all in our minds. That is why even there is an Upanishad statement. It says, Sarvam Manai Eva. That means everything is at the level of mind. We won't go into detail about the Vedantic angle, because that is not the issue here, but we will take a scientific angle of this profound Upanishad statement that everything is at the level of mind. Then how can we be peaceful warriors? If we call ourselves warriors, then we have to have weapons, right? What is the weapon that we're going to be using as peaceful warriors? I love the statement. The sword of a peaceful warrior is love. That's the ultimate. I'm going to add a little adjective to that. Let that word be unconditional. This is where mindfulness really helps us to have that unconditional love. It's not easy, I know that. But if we completely, totally buy into this concept, we will be able to practice it in a joyous manner when the path itself becomes the goal. And when we practice this in a joyous manner, even though it is difficult, the difficult word will not be in our dictionaries. So for this, I have a Kannada phrase, if there is anybody who doesn't understand Kannada, there is a Kannada word called kashta. Kashta means difficulty. If we replace that word kashta with ishta, ishta means we like to do it, we love to do it. If we replace that kashta with ishta, then this process of having this weapon of a peaceful warrior as love, that too unconditional love. And a Sanskrit term for that is ahaituka priti. Ahaituka, loosely translated, is unconditional, without any cause. We don't need to have a cause to love. We need to love the cause. We need to love our goals. We need to love for the sake of love. And I truly believe this is where mindfulness truly comes into picture. Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie. I think well concluded. I just want to know if people have questions. We are at 8:45. I think one question that has come up from Sandhya, I think, got answered. The other is, can we have more sessions on the techniques? I think that I'll let Vasant coordinate. I'm not too sure whether I can answer that question on anybody on Vasant.
Yeah, sure. Certainly, I would suggest that based upon this is also a first-time experience for us. So if you can send back any questions, comments, thoughts, based on that, it will help us to formulate any subsequent webinars on such topic. Of course, other than the regular yoga sessions that we have.
Any other questions? I think if there are no questions, we can. So, Auntie, one question that has come up, I think, from a couple of people, just to, can you allude a bit more on being non-judgmental? I mean, letting go, and clearly letting go helps in being non-judgmental. So, and an added question, I'll paraphrase what somebody's asked, is one is non-judgmental about others, but how about non-judgmental about one's own self, right? You may have limitations in your, I mean, all of us will have our limitations. So how do we kind of be non-judgmental about our own selves?
Today I'll stick to the scientific aspect, but I'll tell you my own personal experience, how it has helped me, and how being non-judgmental, if we have to do it in an intense manner, if we want the effects in a short time, what it is, I'll allude to it a little later. But being non-judgmental to ourselves, I think that's a very good question. Again, a point that we need to start first from ourselves. We need to be kind to ourselves. We need to be loving to ourselves. We need to keep reminding ourselves that this is a process. And we need to really enjoy the process of being non-judgmental, being more kind, being more loving, first to ourselves, so that we can be more loving and more kind to others. As the old adage goes, we can only give what we have. The more kind and more loving we are, that is what we can share with others too. So it's extremely important to start practicing. And one thing, from a scientific angle, taking Yogakshema's philosophy of surviving through any situation, surviving through any circumstance or a crisis, or how do we evolve through that crisis or through any situation. If we are convinced about it, first we need to understand at an intellectual level what it means scientifically. And once we're convinced about it, just asking a simple question to ourselves: do I want to just go through this situation? Just adjust through this situation, just deal with the situation. This is what we mean scientifically as surviving through this situation. Or do I want to use this and truly evolve through this circumstance, through this difficult relationship? I think the answer lies right there. If we make up our mind to truly, at that moment, to evolve, there is no other way except to accept that person in a non-judgmental manner. I know it is tough, but that is the, I would say, the easiest way to, if we start practicing. And again,
And towards ourselves, Auntie. I mean,
yeah, this is, I'm talking first to ourselves and with others. I'm extending. With ourselves, again, the way we need to be evolving, these are our innate qualities. Love, being kind, being compassionate, being loving. Because the age-old Darwinian theory of survival of the fittest is becoming obsolete. It is now survival of the kindest, survival of the most compassionate. This is how the new neuroscience research is bringing more and more and more evidence through to this angle. So just first, to be more kind and more compassionate and not be not be judgmental about ourselves, is to understand this at a scientific level. This is how we're going to be evolving. Whereas when we were kids, we were taught it is survival of the fittest. If you need to move ahead, you need to compare yourself with others, you need to be better than somebody. I've been brought up in that generation. And so be it. I'm not blaming the teachers or the parents or the society. That is how it was at that time. But now we're understanding. Our parents may not still understand if they are not on top of these things. So be it. We need to understand that. But at least now we know. Let us not be like that just because we were brought up like that. This is where we should not go into the formula. It has worked for us, so it has to work for our kids. Let them compete and come ahead. Let us not use that motto. Now it is the survival of the kindest. We know the way we evolve is not through competition, but through cooperation. It is through collaboration. This is how we evolve. If we can understand it in the most scientific way, I keep saying scientific because then there is no differentiation between any socio-economic, educational, religious background. It is one and the same coming from a scientific perspective. This is the aspect. For me, at a personal level, I've been trying to just use it at a scientific level for years and years. Along with that, I have started using certain Vedantic concepts, which is extremely very similar and resonates so well with positive psychology, principles. This is Vedanta at the highest level, which is at the Advaitic level. The terminologies are different, but I'm understanding that Vedanta from a scientific perspective. So it has helped me to combine the two together and to put it into practice. This is at a personal level. This is what has helped me.
Auntie, we'll wrap it up. Thank you tons. Every time I hear you, it's like the first time. Seem to have forgotten what was told before. So I don't know if this is good or a bad way. Let me say I'm being mindful. So are there any other questions? Otherwise, we'll wrap it up, Vasan.
Yeah, I think right now there have been some requests for additional sessions on some